Good morning. I'm Pastor Veronica Smith, and I am here to share with you a daily devotion. Today's devotion is continuing from the book we've been looking at, When God is Silent by Barbara Brown Taylor. It's actually a collection of a sermon lecture series that she did at Yale Divinity School in 1997. And even though it's quite a few years old now, it is timeless. So much of what she has to say in her book and in her stories still works now. It still works today for sure. In fact, I'm finding that especially now in this time of COVID that so much of what Barbara Brown Taylor writes just really works now, really fits, and it's especially needed. We are looking at excerpts from the book, and so that means that we're not reading it cover to cover. And so I would love it if you could get your own copy, help support the author and the book industry. And again, this is what it looks like when God is silent. It's available with Cloister Books, and also it is available with Cowley Publications. So I'd love it if you could get a copy and help support authors and book printing for sure. And if you wonder if it's worth having a printed copy, I will tell you that there's a lot of things highlighted and underlined and written in the margins of my copy of this book. So this is actually my second copy because the first one got pretty well worn, and then I loaned it out to a friend, and they loved it so much that I just told them to keep it, and I get another one. So the section that we're looking at now is called Silence, and this is my favorite of the three sections of her book. It's broken into three parts. The first part was called Famine, but this part called Silence is my absolute favorite. I've read this particular section dozens of times, page upon page, because it's just so meaningful. In fact, many of you have probably set in on a devotion I've led that is based on this section of her book, on the silence section. There's a part that I tend to use for a devotion because it's so very needed. And I think it's especially needed right now. So I encourage you to just sit back and listen, or if you have a copy of the book yourself, turn to page 44 and follow along at today's devotion. Just a reminder, our devotions are available at 11:30 a.m. and 6:45 p.m. right here on our Facebook page. You can also find everything after it's been filmed on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and do a search for Emmanuel Lutheran Killeen, and it'll come right up. Our YouTube channel will. You can also find everything on our website, www.killeenemmanuel.com. And that is everything. Our worship services, devotions, story times, messages, and information and notes as well. So we hope you'll join us for that. So let's begin. It is more and more difficult for us to choose silence when communication is possible. To let the telephone ring, to leave the email unread, to unplug the fax machine. These amount to acts of social sabotage. To choose silence for even an hour, we must risk the loss of connection with other people who may have a hard time understanding how anything could be more important to us than responding to them. We must also handle our own sense of anxiety. What if that is a call from the fire department, from the hospital, from someone who wants to invite me to dinner? For some of us, silence provokes so much internal chatter that it cancels itself out. True silence is difficult to achieve, even at night when most of the world is asleep. A dedicated insomniac can count at least half a dozen engines running in the dark. The refrigerator, the water heater, the ice maker, the furnace, the expressway noise that sounds like pounding surf at 2 a.m, the distant roar of an airplane passing overhead. Depending on who you are, these sounds may be comforting. They mean everything is working. In the world of machines, silence signals malfunction. Remember the last time your electricity went off and all the sound stopped? Just like that? Even our bodies are not silent. The composer John Cage has written about his visit to Harvard, where he spent some time in an anechoic chamber, a room without echoes. Inside, his perfect ears picked up two distinct sounds, one high and one low. When he described them to the engineer in charge, Cage learned that the high sound was his nervous system in operation, and the low one was his blood in circulation. Until I die, there will be sounds, he wrote afterward, and they will continue following my death. One need not fear about the future of music. No wonder so many of us are ambivalent about silence. Silence may suggest tranquility and awe, but it may also mean malfunction and death. Peace appeals to me, but not so much that I am ready to rest in peace. Making a little noise is how I remind myself that I am alive. It is how I exercise my superiority over dirt, trees, and rocks, by mimicking the Creator who brought me into being with a word. It is also how I act on my identity as a Christian. All who believe in the Word made flesh are inheritors of the Word. Hearing it and speaking it are how we keep it alive. When that word fell silent on Golgotha, when, after a loud cry, both the high sound of his nervous system and the low sound of his beating heart stopped, the earth shook with grief. Rocks made the only sound they could, splitting open with small explosions that were their best version of tears. The veil in the temple was torn from top to bottom, with a sound of such ripping that those who heard it thought it was the sky. The whole inanimate world leapt in to fill that silence, while poor, dumb humanity stood speechless before the cross. That always takes my breath away. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, and also a good reminder to us. What I really appreciate about this particular section is, even though it does talk about fax machines being unplugged, that it still gets at the heart of the matter, that we somehow, by being constantly hooked up to technological devices, with means of communication, that when we disconnect from them, that somehow that's bad. And I will tell you, I am probably the worst one. I'm definitely guilty of that. And that I forget that it's okay to be disconnected from technology, that I am not the president of the United States who needs to have a phone on me at all times in case of nuclear war. I am not a foremost neurosurgeon who specializes in some disease that needs to be available 24/7 for that emergency surgery that needs to be done, and I'm the only one who can do it. Um, I think so often we think that it's not necessarily about, well, that I think I'm that important that I must always be available. But I think so often it's that we want to be that important, so that when someone does want to get a hold of us, that we feel like we're that important. And that's hard to hear. I wonder about what it's like to fast from all of these things. I'm starting to notice that my blood pressure runs a little higher when I'm constantly connected to technology. And I know that this time of COVID, when that's all we have to communicate with people is our smartphones and our computers and our iPads or whatever it is we have, that's our connection to humanity, that we have no other means of connecting to humanity. And so it becomes even more of a lifeline. It's like an IV providing us with some communication and relationship medication that we feel we can't survive without. And I get that, I do. But I also think that it's good to cut the cord, to disconnect from technology for a little while, to be fully present with those whom we love and care about, the people in our bubbles right now, or even just to disconnect from technology and to reconnect with ourselves, with our faith, with God. When I am checking my phone for text messages and voicemails and video chats and Messenger and everything else, all the social media accounts, I'm not deeply connecting with God and those around me. And I think it's really important that we do that. I think right now, especially, that it's okay if we say, today is my day off and I'm going to completely disconnect. Because I'll tell you, friends, unless you are the President of the United States, and believe me, he has people to come tell him if he's needed. He doesn't need to have the phone. But unless you are a world leader, it's probably okay for you to take a day off from technology. I love power outages right now. I don't like them as much when it's really hot and I want the air conditioning. But in general, having the power go out for a few hours is a huge blessing. When I don't have electricity, there's no expectation that I am going to be checking my email or answering that phone or sending a text message. I can completely disconnect and just be with my family. Now, of course, anything longer than a day gets a little hard. Of course, with where we live in Texas, when it's 100 degrees outside, you definitely want to have the AC or the ability to run a fan. And of course, you don't want your food to go bad because there's no electricity keeping your food cold in the fridge and freezer. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the idea of disconnecting. And a power outage forces us to do that. We have no choice. But we don't need to wait until there's a power outage to disconnect with technology and reconnect with God. At least I hope we don't. I've said before about one of the reasons that I love cruising is because I can stick my phone in the safe and not check email or social media or text messages or phone calls for the whole time I'm away. I love it. I love it because it's a test for me and it's a challenge. And the first day or two is really, really hard. I can't tell you the number of times I'll reach for my pocket to grab my phone, or I'll say something about, oh, I want to send a quick message to so and so. That's hard those first few days. But after that, there's this great relief because you get to just be. And so, friends, that's my challenge for you. In this time of extreme connectivity to technology, sometime in the next week or two, I want you to pick a day. I want you to pick a day and I want you to say, when I get up in the morning until I go to sleep at night, I will not use any technology. I won't use my phone. I won't use my computer. I'll just completely disconnect. Now, if you are one of our seniors and you have one of those alert things or the call center calls every day, that's a different story. But whatever you can do to disconnect for a day, just a day, try it and see how it feels. See the kinds of things that you notice because you're not distracted by it. That to me is what's really beautiful, is the things that are constantly surrounding me that my brain is too busy with technology to actually see and experience firsthand. So that's your homework for the next week or two. Maybe it'll take you a little while to figure out a schedule to do that. But take some time away from technology. See what it's like. Maybe even write down the things that you notice. Maybe even talk about your feelings about how nervous you might feel by not having it or how relieved you are. I'd love to hear and know what it feels like to do that disconnect. Because in the silence of the lack of communication and technology and electronic devices, we're still being spoken to. God has lots to say, but we've got to remove those distractions to hear what God has to say. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope that you take the time to try that challenge of cutting yourself away from technology and electronic devices for a day. I hope that you find ways to listen to God in ways that you've never listened before. God loves you, and so do I. Goodbye, friends.